There's some sort of creature down at the bottom of the lake. It's always like the perfect amount of plot. It's pared back, but the language is still really like musical. I was making fun of it a little bit at first, I'm not gonna lie. What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Today is my November wrap-up. I did move this month, so I only read 5 books. One of them was a DNF, or it would have been 6, but I had a lot going on. And I mean, it was kind of a mixed bag, but there's one 5-star, 1 or 2 5-stars in here. And I feel like that's always a good reading month if you had at least 1 5-star. Okay, so first up was actually a book of poetry. And I haven't been reading a lot of poetry at all. It's just not a genre that I really gravitate towards, to be honest. And I think I mentioned in the video where I did my bookshelf like organizing, I mentioned like if you have poetry recommendations, leave some in the comments for me. So definitely do that, because poetry, it was always so intimidating in school. It was like, because I felt like I didn't get it, like I didn't understand it. And I think I just tend to be overly analytical, and so a lot of times I need to just like calm down and just read it and feel whatever I feel, and like that's valid enough. I will take poetry recommendations if you have them. The one that I read for the month of November was Brian Turner's The Goodbye World poem. So he was the workshop leader. If you guys watched I'll link it in the cards, my writing retreat in the mountains kind of video. I think it was like the first or second Vlogtober that went up this past month. Never heard of him, to be completely honest. But he was the guy who ran the workshop. He has a memoir. He's got several books of poetry. This obviously is one of them. I really enjoyed them. I think maybe so, like more so because I have met him and had some context for some of the things that he was writing about. But honestly, even, I mean, if you've never met him, like these are still amazing poems. I did mark up a few of them that were my faves. This is a poetry collection mainly about grief. So when he came in and he was talking about, you know, his writing life and his dog and his wife, and we didn't think anything of it. He was still wearing his wedding ring. And then we found out later that day something came up and he was like, oh, my wife has passed away. And I remember being like, oh, because he was still, I think she passed away in 2016, but he was still wearing his wedding ring, so we didn't really have, and he was like actively talking about her, like he says that he's still married to her. So anyway, a lot of these poems are about him grieving her. So trigger warning for, you know, death and grieving. She did pass away from cancer. So that would be a big trigger warning to anybody if you went into this not knowing that. It does come up in a couple of poems. I think the first one, it was either the first or second one right off the bat, just hit me right in the feels. I think it's the first one called The Crossing, and it's about like crossing over, but it was like so beautiful and poignant. I didn't feel like crying because I was sad. It was like, but I had a frog in my throat because of how beautiful it was. There's one about it's called Falling Giants. It's about a whale fall, like the death of a whale. There's a lot in here. There's even a QR code. Let me see if I can find it on one of the poems. And it takes you to a song, because he was and maybe still is, I'm not sure, a musician. He was in a band at one point. So I really like these. I think I gave it like 4.5 stars. So I loved this collection. And he has another one. I'll be reading this one probably like maybe in the new year. But I picked them both up in the store before I left the workshop. This is The Wild Delight of Wild Things. And I have no idea if this one's any different or really similar. I'm not totally sure, but that will be his next one that I read. And then I think next was another volume of The Girl from the Other Side manga, which I'm obsessed with. If you guys have seen like literally any video of mine, then I will have shown you one of these before. Super cute and wholesome, just like all of the other ones. I always say it's like a dark fairy tale, but I always say it's like cottagecore vibes, but also like horror. Like if cottagecore was like a horror aesthetic at the same time. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but These are so good. I love watching Shiva. She's starting to get a little bit older. She's kind of growing up. There's more danger. They kind of have to be, she and teacher are kind of like on the run. I think they've got like, yeah, like suitcases and stuff with them. And so we kind of get to see them go off on an adventure this time instead of just kind of chilling at home. Because there's lots of things happening. There's soldiers from the inside, which is like humans who are coming from the safety of the castle to try to get them for various reasons. But then there's also these other creatures, I think just called the Black Children, something like that. And there's some sort of creature down at the bottom of the lake that they refer to as the Mother. There's a lot going on in the plot. So I definitely always give each one a 5-star because it's just always like perfect. It's always like the perfect amount of plot. So loved that, of course. And I think next was the one that I was reading like while we were moving, and I was afraid that this one, because it's a translated work, it's for my Reading Around the World challenge, I was afraid that it was going to be like I was going to be too scattered from all the moving and stuff and all the chaos that I wasn't going to like be able to get into it, or it wasn't going to like keep my attention or whatever. And this book I was so ready to jump back into every single spare second that I had of time. I obviously took a decent amount of notes, and yeah, I loved it. This was my 5-star for the month. I think it was maybe my only 5-star. This is about a girl named Saba. I think I'm pronouncing her name right. It's just S-A-B-A. That's how I was pronouncing it. And she is on the run. She arrives at a refugee camp. She's fleeing war along with many other people. She's got a brother who's mute who's with her. Her mother, there's a midwife coming with them, all sorts of people from their village that they're having to flee, and they end up in this refugee camp. The author, and I'm not 100% sure how to say his name, I was pronouncing it Sulaiman Addonia. He's an Eritrean writer, so this is for the country of Eritrea. He experienced something incredibly similar to her, so I think it's like heavily inspired by his life, but it's not a memoir. It's basically just life in the camp. And I don't want to say not a lot happens, because even though it's not super plot heavy, there's a lot of story. But it's mainly like brother-sister dynamic. Like I said, the brother is mute. I think his name was Hagos. I think it was Hagos. And she kind of serves as not necessarily his translator, but kind of, because they've been through some trauma together. And so they are kind of helping each other through that trauma. And then he also has the added kind of difficulty of either choosing not to speak or physically not being able to speak. I don't know if they ever specified if it was like because he literally couldn't or if it was by choice. Essentially, we're following Saba as she tries to earn enough money doing random odd jobs, working for people who come and go, to try to earn enough to leave so that she can pursue an education, because that's the main thing that she really wants to do, because when she flees, she has to leave her books behind, and so she really wants an education, and so that's her ultimate goal. I was also obsessed with his writing. It's not a thick book, like it's really only, was it like 200? It's about 200 pages, and this book did the wonderful job of just saying and communicating what the author was wanting to say without droning on for another 200 pages. I feel like honestly there was enough story here, and I loved the characters so much. I could have read another 50 or 100 pages, but I love that he didn't write another 50 or 100 pages, because that's always my biggest complaint with a book, is that it's usually not on the author, really. It's more like on the editor for not editing relentlessly enough. And I felt like he probably had a really good editor, because it's pared back, but the language is still really like musical and beautiful. I only have good things to say about this. Loved it. And then next was one that I've been working on for a while. This is Daughter Drink This Water by Jaiya. I think that's how you say his name. Sorry about the shadows. You can see my microphone, but it's only like, 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon, and the sun is already setting, so that's great. This is, I think, one that I saw on Instagram. It's not a novel. It's not something that you would like sit down and read, kind of like I was doing, where it's like you just continue reading it like one little part after the next. Each section, there's a whole bunch of different sections in here, are about something different, some emotion that you will experience in your life. So it's all about like what it means to be a woman and commentary on that. But it just says it's a timeless affirmation for girls and women in particular. His daughter, drink this water, feeds you short devotional passages in an ancestral voice that penetrates the heart and reveals the divine nature of your phenomenal journey. So yeah, it talks all about like just relationships and emotion and human connection and romance and just being human, being a woman. And so I did really like it. Now I will say, the reason why I knocked it a couple stars, I think I gave it like 3.5, 4 stars, is because the way that it's written is very much like, I'm guilty of following a few of these people on Instagram. Girls who look like they spend all day just like lounging on the beach, and their captions are like very, very general, kind of flowery language, and they talk about, you know, how they woke from a dream and their words were just like honey dripping from their lips, and like that kind of language. It's full of that. And so I was making fun of it a little bit at first, I'm not gonna lie. I was judging it pretty hard for that, because that's what it kind of reads like. It takes a little bit to kind of get into the rhythm of it, but you'll notice I marked up quite a few passages because there are some in there that are really beautiful. So yeah, just be aware some of the explanations for things are going to be so vague, kind of like when you're reading a horoscope and it like has to apply to, like they're trying to apply, you know, what they're saying to like thousands of people. So they use very general, vague terminology and language. It kind of feels like that at times. I skip through and find a topic that sounds like something that you need, like you feel like that you need to hear, and then just read that passage, like just read those couple of pages and then dip back out, and then dip back in when you feel like you need, you know, to be reading about something else, because I feel like that's how it would be most useful. So there were absolutely passages in here that were gorgeous and so beautiful, but yeah, there's also ones that are just like so general, it was almost kind of hard to understand what he meant. You know, sometimes I'd be like, but what are you saying? Like, but what are you saying? You know, I do feel like books like this are kind of a light in the dark because we do experience and we consume so much negativity nowadays from social media and just the internet. So honestly, it is nice to consume something every now and then that is just, it's very encouraging and it's very nurturing. So for that reason, I did really like it. And then, oh, before I mention my last one, I have to mention the DNF. I did try to read American Psycho by Bret, Easton, Ellis. I have read Ellis before. I read Less Than Zero, and this was very similar. And I wasn't a big fan of Less Than Zero, so now I know I'm maybe just not an Ellis fan. I'm not an Ellis girl. It's very much like if you want to know what it would be like to be inside the mind of one of the most like pompous, narcissistic men living in New York in the 1980s, and watching him go to a million different lunches and tell you every little detail about what he's ordering and what everybody else at the table is ordering and what everybody else at the table. I mean, it's a satire, don't get me wrong. Like, he's doing that for a reason. He's kind of making fun of that kind of lifestyle, like the one percenters. But it wasn't enough. There wasn't enough like making fun of it for me to like continue reading it. I think I got like halfway through too. I literally got like 50% of the way through, and I just stopped. I put it down. I was like, I can't even do one more sentence. Like, I'm done. I'm moving back because the light is like right on my face. I would say trigger warning for like the abuse and torture of animals as well as people. I did watch the film, and I liked the film because the film is like a truncated version of the book. And, you know, everything's much shorter and you're not hearing his every freaking thought. I feel like it was gruesome, which is exactly what the book was. You still get the sense that they're all mindless elite zombies who, you know, don't really give a crap about anybody else but themselves. I don't understand how a book like that was even edited. Like, how do you as the editor not take out what was in there. Maybe Ellis was already like doing really well in his career by then. Watch the movie if you're in the mood for like a rated R, very bloody, gruesome movie, but I was not a fan of the book. Our last book of the month is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Finally, I got to this book. It just weirdly gets pushed every year. Like it just gets pushed back and back and back. I always try for October because it's kind of, you know, it's like dark academic, and then it gets pushed and pushed and pushed until the next year. That's happened for the past couple of years. Like I've had this book on my shelf for genuinely years now, but I finally got to it. And to be honest, I wasn't obsessed with it. It was okay. It was decent. I think I gave it 3.5 stars. It is set in like is it called a conservatory? Yeah, they're basically learning, there's 7 of them, 7 students, and there's Shakespeare actors, specifically Shakespeare only. So that part was kind of cool, like reading about what the day-to-day life of an actor, like a student who's learning to become an actor, is like. I would say that's probably the thing that the author does best, is just giving you kind of a slice of life of what that would have been like for those students. However, I felt like, and it's maybe kind of my own fault because I was sort of comparing it to Donna Tartt's The Secret History, which is kind of like the gold standard of dark academic books. So comparing it to like the best one that I've ever read probably wasn't the greatest idea, because it certainly fell short of that. The writing was okay. I liked the main character, Oliver. He seems to be the most like ordinary and normal out of all the other characters, but there just wasn't a lot of action. It literally took, there's always, so in dark academic books like this, there's always a thing. There's always either a murder or there's something, right? There's some big thing that happens in the plot that you're waiting for because it's kind of like the event on set. Like it's the thing that triggers all the panic and all the chaos and all the plot of the book, right? It took 140 pages for that to happen in this book. I almost did DNF it when I got to page 100 because I was like, I've read 100 pages of this and like nothing's happened. It was all very much, again, like the day-to-day lives of these characters, and more so about like the dynamic between them and like who was sleeping with who and who hated who and who, you know, like all that kind of stuff, like the Gossip Girl stuff was happening for like the first 100 pages. And if it had been any longer, if it had taken the author any longer to get to the event, it probably would have been a DNF. It's only like 300 something pages. It's like 350 pages. I don't think it should take 130 pages for you to get to the thing. So that's my biggest complaint. It should have moved much quicker in the beginning. It just would have been more of an enjoyable read if we had gotten there a little bit quicker. You have Oliver, who feels kind of like he's ordinary. He's not as like handsome as the other ones, but he's like the nice guy. And then you have like the girl who's sort of I kept thinking about Twilight, and I kept thinking about the Cullens and how like you have Emmett, who's like the big strong handsome one, which would be Richard in this book, and then you have Rosalie, who's like the gorgeous, like drop dead gorgeous one, that would be Meredith in this book, and then you have like the tiny little sprightly pixie girl like Alice in Twilight, and then in this book it would be Wren. So like you have those like stereotypes, like those archetypes. And I think that that's fine, but yeah, I honestly couldn't stop thinking of Twilight at certain points. It was okay, definitely wouldn't reread it. I felt like the ending was very bizarre. The ending had like no basis. There was like one scene, one line of dialogue that like hinted at the end. His actions in the end were very questionable, and I felt like kind of unfounded, and just I didn't feel anything. I guess it made me feel some kind of way, but not really strongly enough to give it more than 3.5 stars. So that was my last one for November. So here is the little short stack for the month. The little short stack this month. There was at least one 5-star in there that kind of kept me going throughout the month. So you guys let me know what you read for the month of November, if there's any poetry collections or translated works that were published like in another language in another country that would work for my Reading Around the World challenge, because I am always eager to hear your recommendations. So leave those in the comments if you have any for me. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye guys.